I tend to agree with everything Mrs. Craven said. I don't think that we will have somebody in place by July 1st. And I mean, I know I have another group of comments for the job description. So, and I also agree that it's going to take some time to get on board and to learn our economic development plan, and to create a strategy, and then that's going to have us sit down and look at what we're doing with the chamber. So I think it's completely reasonable to extend the contract. You know, there's been a lot of comments out in the community and emails that we've received, and I'm grateful that Mr. Tremblay helped to clear up some of the myths and stories that get made up when people don't know the truth. So I'm really glad we've clarified that relationship with CHTA. I also just, you know, there's this claim that the contract we have with the chamber is very vague. I don't find it vague at all. There's it's the scope of services is laid out very clearly and detailed. In my short time being on the council and being at ribbon cuttings and talking to business owners that I hadn't had the chance to speak to before, I hear very complimentary things about the chamber and how helpful they are and how supportive they are. And I see at the ribbon cuttings members of the board that show up to support the new business owners, and I find that invaluable to our community. I know that we're going to have to redefine our relationship with the chamber once we hire our economic development coordinator, can't remember the name, a person. And we will do that, and I hope that we will do that in partnership with the chamber and with the best interests of the city and the chamber and the new position. So those are my comments.
Any comments? Mr. Tremblay?
No, as you can guess, I've got a few, probably more than a few. So full disclosure, I was the chair of the Chamber of Commerce Board almost 20 years ago. Hard to believe that time goes by that fast. But with no current affiliation other than to go to ribbon cuttings and et cetera. The emails that we received, I want to respond to a little bit, because in essence what they are saying, and what one speaker said here, is that the city should not renew the contract, and the flip side of that is what they really mean is that their view is that the city should terminate the contract with the chamber immediately. I mean, that's what we're talking about. I mean, that's what the assertion is, and it starts from the premise that the chamber offers zero benefit to the city. And I just don't agree with that. I disagree with the premise. I think it's part of a slash and burn mentality. Having a well-functioning chamber does bring benefits to the city, and specifically to the city of Camarillo. In my view, and this is generally speaking, it's not on the contract language, you know, I see the chamber as serving as a focal point for business, and we've received email. We received an email on that from a local business thanking the chamber for their work as a focal point for business and city communications. Secondly, for the promotion of business in the city and promotion of the city as well. And thirdly, and one that is dear to my heart, is the chamber's work with Cal State University Channel Islands, which I think they've done a very good job in. And they've kept that going. The chamber functions, in my view, as kind of a central point of contact. If you don't have a functioning, working chamber of commerce, you have a vacuum. And I really appreciate the question that you asked, Shawn, about relative to, you know, have other groups come in and asked to take over some of these functions. And I know, in large part, we've got a we have another agenda item, in fact, the next one, relative to our economic development manager. And I have a number of comments and things that I'd like to see in the job description as well, or added to the job description. And I think it's reasonable to allow some time for that economic development manager to evaluate the Chamber's services. And I think, be very pragmatic about it, the economic development manager is going to take over a number of services that the Chamber has offered in the past. I think that's logical. There's been an assertion that the Chamber should be entirely self-sustaining on membership fees. That's not exactly how it's been asserted to us, but that's in essence what the assertion is, or at least largely self-sustaining on membership fees. I agree with that to an extent. I think that's a fair point, but I also think it's overly simplistic, because if the person making the assertion is trying to argue that the Chamber can't offer its services for contract with either the city or a third party and receive funds for that work, then that just strikes me as wrong. It's like saying they can't operate like you would have a business operate. Well, I expect a Chamber to operate in a business-like way. I do think that the contract is somewhat vague in parts, in terms of its scope of services. I mean, I look at it, we don't disagree strongly, but I do think there are some areas that I would, personally, I would work on, and it's relative to the specificity of the services. And no disrespect, that's probably comes from, my own occupational background and wanting to be more specific in defining the services. And I also agree with the folks who we've received emails from that the city should receive value for the Chamber services. I mean, that's just logical, because there should be an arm's length relationship, but also there's obviously a relationship that for many years, and legitimately so, is based on respect for one another, based on the fact that the Chamber has done good work for the city, and the city has done good work. It's been a symbiotic relationship in many ways. The question is, logically, what's the level of services that the Chamber provides to the city, and whether they're adequately characterized and whether they're adequately specified in a contract. And to me right now, it's a little bit difficult when I look at the scope of services to parse through that. Notice we're just not quite on the same wavelength on that one, Ms. Santangelo. I think it's somewhat difficult to parse the specificity of the services, and more to the point, I think their value in dollars relative to the contract. I think that, and that's kind of a challenge. So we're spending public monies. We need to spend them prudently. We need to be fiscally conservative, in my view. But we also need to give our new economic development manager time to evaluate and to have him or her come into their position and really look at this contract and look at the entire relationship between the city and the Chamber and decide what to do. Now, there's in the contract itself, there's a termination clause. The city can terminate the contract at any time. The Chamber, I think, can terminate the contract on 30 days' notice. But anyway, bottom line is there is an escape hatch for both. Sorry to use that term, but that's in essence it is. I mean, there's a termination clause for both parties. I'm willing to vote because we really have to give the economic development manager time, and a reasonable amount of time. I don't believe if we cut off the services right now, there's nothing there. That to me isn't reasonable. That to me doesn't make sense. That said, I don't want to go for a long extended period of time without drilling down with our new economic development manager and having him or her come to us and say, hey, this is what I'm going to be doing. This is the way we should structure the relationship with the Chamber, et cetera. So I want to propose two options. One is I'm willing to go along with a one-year renewal of the agreement, provided that, on condition that we provide, as a council, we provide direction to staff to bring that contract back to us on or before October 31 of this year for reevaluation. I think, practically speaking, the job description isn't finalized yet. We've got to go through recruitment. I kind of feel like you, Charlotte. I think probably September 1, but maybe I was hoping August 1. There's no way it's going to happen by July 1. And I mean, I can't wait for this to happen because we've been working really hard on this economic development plan. We've been advocating for a full-time manager for a long time. This is great stuff. But we got to give it a little time to work. So one approach is approve the agreement, but on the condition that it's brought back to us by October 31 for reevaluation, or conversely, as a second approach, agreeing to extend it until October 31 with a reevaluation at that point. That, to me, doesn't make as much sense because we already have, both sides already have the termination option anyway. I would favor us renewing the contract for a year, but on the direction that it comes back to us for reevaluation as of October 31. And those are my comments.
Comments from Mr. Boucher?
Yeah, I will try to be somewhat brief.
More than me.
So, full disclosure, I've been a chamber member in every single business I've been involved in every business I've started. I used to write in their newsletter when they had a paper newsletter that went out on a monthly basis. I was a feature columnist there. My first job out of college was working for a Chamber of Commerce.
Not this one.
Not this one. Not this one. When I was a student out at CSU Channel Islands, I sat on the committee, the liaison committee between CSU Channel Islands and the Chamber. I can attest to the work that was done on that front. And there has been a tremendous amount of work, and I applaud them for that work. I'm not against the services agreement. I personally believe that the agreement needs to be more finite in its objectives. Kind of echoing a little bit what Mr. Tremblay said, I would like to see quantitative benchmarks to help measure success. I would like to be a little bit more direct in what exactly we hope to achieve out of this. I'm hoping for more clear objectives. The agreement as it stands right now doesn't quite do that for me. I can agree to Mr. Tremblay's and support Mr. Tremblay's suggestion that or the condition that we revisit this come by or before October 31st. By then, we'll hopefully have the economic development manager, and we can kind of reassess at that time how things change. The Chamber undoubtedly has a place in economic development in Camarillo. I don't question that. I do question the role it plays and the services it provides once we bring an economic development manager on board. So there is a role for the Chamber. I just think it's different than how it's presented today and how it's encapsulated in this professional services agreement. There is one thing that I would like to amend this agreement and require one item. And I know that the Chamber of Commerce, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if it's monthly or quarterly, but they give a presentation to the Economic Development Committee.
Not quarterly? Every other month? What is it?
It's every other month.
Oh, bi-monthly. I know it's an oral report. For a lot of us who can't be there, it's often in the morning on a Friday. As much as I would love to attend those meetings and be in the audience and watch. I can't. So I would like to at least have that report presented in some sort of written form or submitted in some sort of written form, in addition to given orally. And Mr. Cushing, who I think is the one who normally gives the presentation, can elaborate based on the report. But I would like that report submitted physically, something in writing. And I think when I talk about quantitative objectives or something that we can quantify as to what the Chamber is doing, that is one way of doing it. because the oral report is usually not reflected in the minutes, at least not that I can clearly see. So if we can put something in writing, then I think it's all the more beneficial and it's all the more quantifiable. At this time, I can support approving this financial service, this agreement, on the condition that we come back or staff brings it back for the council to revisit by or before October 31st.